Good evening. It is 7 p.m. Wednesday, November 7th, 2018. This is a public hearing of the Town of Speedway Board of Zoning Appeals. I'm Mike Simonson, Chairman of the Board. Other board members in attendance tonight are Mike Allen, our Vice Chairman, Tyler Carmichael, our Secretary, Janet Fullen, and Steve Jones, members of the board. Representing the Indianapolis Department of Metropolitan Development is Ms. Kathleen Blackham. Have all who wish to speak been sworn in?
They have.
Thank you. Would all please mute or turn off any cell phones at this time? Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Rules for those who wish to speak at tonight's hearing. Petitioner, remonstrator, or proponents will each have 15 minutes to present their evidence. We will then hear from Kathleen Blackham with her report. Following her report, there will be a 5-minute rebuttal period for the petitioner, remonstrators, or proponents. Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes from our previous meeting?
Yes.
Are there any corrections or changes? No. Seeing none, the minutes will stand as published. Tonight's first petition is 2018 DVS 005, 5503 West 16th Street, John and Rita Jo Reller. Will the petitioner or their representative please step to the podium, state your name and address for the record, and present your case?
Thank you. My name is John Reller, and I'm the petitioner. My wife and I have purchased a house at 5503 West 16th Street. We originally bought this for a nephew and niece to reside in, and after they decided to move on and live elsewhere, we've decided that this is where we want to live. And so we've put together a plan, working with the city, to expand the house. It was built in 1949 and was very much in line with a typical craftsman bungalow. One of the characteristics of a craftsman bungalow, which we're wanting to highlight, is the front porch. It doesn't really have a great front porch. And in addition to that, add a portico, a carport, a garage, and extend out the back of it. And the subjects that we need to talk about that I'm requesting a variance on is the overall development of the site. There's a 30% of the total site allowed to be in building, and our calculation, and I'm not an attorney or a planner or anything like that, but I came up with 30.9%. I'm not sure my calculation was done correctly because of roof overhangs and things like that. So in that regard, what I'm asking for is to expand that to 35%. And I believe if that were the only thing that I were asking for, staff would be recommending approval of that. I'm also needing to address the setbacks. In this zoning area, there's a requirement of a total of 16 feet, which can be divided between the two sides, and currently the house sits with one side having 15 feet, that's the side that the driveway's on, and the other side has 6 feet. What we're desiring to do is, so often when you see these older homes, the driveway and the garage is too small, and if it happens to have a carport, it's very tight to drive through. And one of the things that we're thinking about in designing this remodel is aging in place. We want this to be our final residence, and so the considerations that we're making in many regards are thinking about 10, 15 years down the road. If I could, I'd like to share with you a couple drawings that I've prepared.
Sure.
Because it's kind of complicated going through the thought process. And I'm going to explain these in order. And Catherine, this is roughly what I emailed to you earlier, but I've also got one for you.
Thank you.
The first drawing is roughly what our petition showed. And at that time, I requested a 1-foot setback. I was not familiar with some of the general criteria with the zoning and thinking setback is setback. The leading edge of the gutter is what I was anticipating. I have now found out that from the foundation, or in my instance, the post for the carport is the leading edge, and you can actually extend beyond that with a roof overhang and a gutter up to 18 inches. So for my discussions, I'm going to focus only on the location of the post. Now, the setback that I originally asked for was for 1-foot setback, and that's now been changed, but let me walk you through it. If we have the house 18 inches over is where I want my drive to start, then I want a 10-foot drive opening. And what I'm thinking about is, at a later point in time, a 10-foot drive opening may be a pretty good sized target for me to hit. 9 feet is tight, and so it's not overly generous. And then I'd like to have 18 inches on the other side for a post, which then would leave a 2-foot setback. The second drawing I have is what I believe to be what staff is willing to recommend, and that is the 18 inches roughly, plus the 10-foot opening, plus a 6-inch post. Okay, so that would, the 10 feet plus the 18 inches, but the 6 inches would have me at 12, 3 feet setback gets the 15, which is what I've got total from the wall of the house to the property line. I could live with that. But what I want to point out, and the reason I want to ask for a little bit more, is because if we go, and I've got some pictures, just the new garage, the landscape plan, the photograph showing the existing 6-foot chain link fence, which my neighbor has, and it's in great shape, and it's got a wonderful foliage growing in it, and we both worked together to remove it. Both houses have not been very well maintained over the last, I'll say, 3 or 4 years, and so there have been a lot of trees and things that have grown up in that we've cleaned out, but it's very healthy. The last picture shows what we're desiring, and that is columns which mirror the columns which would be on our front porch. And we believe that that would be more aesthetically pleasing than just a 6-inch post that we would put there. But because that's 18 inches in width, 6 inches, difference of 18 inches is another foot. So what I'm asking for is a 2-foot setback rather than a 3-foot setback, which I believe the staff is recommending. Now, when we get into talking about the setback and the purpose of the setback, there's 3 criteria in the staff's comments which address why we want to have setbacks, and I want to point out how these really, I don't think, are affected, 1, by the 1 or 2 feet that I'm asking for, and 2, in concept at all, because of the 6-foot fence that exists currently. The reasons for setbacks are a buffer between uses. We have an excellent buffer between the uses, and that's the strong vegetation. Emergency equipment being able to respond and getting in there. Whether that opening is 3 feet or 2 feet or 6 feet, isn't going to allow an emergency vehicle of any type to get in there. So that doesn't really apply. And the third one is to maintain the properties. Right now, my neighbor cannot get on his side of the fence without trespassing. That's fine, he and I get along great, but just the concept of, I could build a fence on my property line, but I can't put these two posts, seem a little bit contradictory in that. So although I could, and we're prepared to accept what staff has recommended, I wanted to show you what we'd really like to do, how that extra foot or two does not significantly change the dynamics of the area, and from a aesthetic, appearance, total development, I think it's a more favorable approach. So with that, I'll make myself available for questions.
In your proposal on the last drawing that we have, I guess the third drawing, you're wanting 2 decorative columns?
Yeah, the ones, not
picture
really
frame
a
the driveway?
subject, but that's what we're believing would look the best.
So there'd be one up closer to the house and then the one out to actually support the roof system?
Yes, sir. I've met with my neighbor. As a matter of fact, when you look at those pictures that I brought, you can kind of see that I've built a little brick column base, which is where the 12-foot point is, and his point of view is, I don't care. I support what you're wanting to do. We like the idea of you're improving the house. As I say, since that fence is there, it makes it a little bit of a moot point versus if the fence wasn't there.
In the original drawings that you submitted, you only showed a single column or row of columns on the outside.
That's correct.
So these are updated, these have changed
Yes.
to include the one next to the house and then the larger columns, one next to the house and one on the outside of the carport then?
Yeah, when we originally submitted the plans, and this is back in August, it was a long time ago that I had to
Right.
get the filing in, we hadn't completed our design work, and the architect, these guys aren't cheap, I wasn't able to give him good direction on what to build because we needed to go through this variance. So I said, just show it simply, and I'll work through the details as we've met with a contractor, and further discussions have resolved to this is the most desirable approach to take.
So the interior post doesn't offer anything other than aesthetics.
That's correct.
So it could potentially be removed and still give you a wider
What it
drive
does,
space.
now, from the wall of the house to where our driveway starts, because we can't drive a car just right next to it, that's 18 inches out.
Okay.
So that 18 inches could have nothing, it could have a 6-inch
So
post,
that
or it
first
could have
column,
this.
first
that's-
column is going in that
that
18-inch no
inches.
man's land.
Well, according
Correct.
to the prints on the side of the house to the driveway, it shows a step down then? Am I correct? I was reading.
Yeah, it's not 24 inches.
Well,
or
but
18
still, I
inches,
mean, you're
but it's-
talking 2 steps, minimum, 11 inches deep
And
each, I
that's
think, so.
exactly what we need to get outside of with the drive.
So would that inside column be in line with those steps, basically?
Yeah,
It would kind of, hiding them from the street, but
it does exactly.
even if we did
that.
away with the inside column, those steps are still
Still
there,
there,
correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So then you're requesting basically a 10-foot wide carport with 2 18-inch posts for a total of 13 feet then? Where staff recommends 12 feet, am I correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
I'm sure Kathleen, she and I talked about this on the phone a few hours ago, and it's difficult without having a drawing to really follow along with what you're talking about, so.
The only concern that I have with the narrow setback is you get along great with your current neighbor. But if something were to transition, they moved out, and we get a different neighbor in there, we don't know what that dynamic could be. And that's why sometimes the setbacks are set for what they are, so it does give you adequate space to work on or maintain your property without having to battle with a neighbor for access.
Yeah, and Kathleen can explain this a little bit more thoroughly. As she explained it to me, you can put a fence on the property line, and this fence can essentially be a wall, a brick structure. So I'm asking for two 18-inch posts, which you can walk around easy.
Sure. Any other questions for the petitioner? Steve, do you have anything? Any questions?
No. Other than on your fifth page,
He's talking about the originals.
on the
submission.
original, it says requesting variance on west side to 1 foot, okay?
He's modified that
Yeah,
now.
Right.
It's down
that's
to 2
before
feet.
I understood that the roof overhang would be 18 inches without a,
I understand. I just want to make it clear that what you're wanting,
I agree.
okay?
I do too, because I don't want to get done and find out I didn't get the 10-foot drive aisle.
It's been modified to a 2-foot
Yes.
setback
Okay.
is what the request is for. Okay. Janet, do you have any questions?
I don't.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone here who wishes to speak for or against the petition? Seeing none, we'll hear from Ms. Blackham from DMD.
Thank you, Kathleen Blackham with the Department of Metropolitan Development. Address is 200 East Washington Street, room 1842. Staff is recommending denial of this request as it was initially filed with a 1-foot setback. Staff, again, and the petitioner has talked about the reasons for staff's denial, emergency access, maintenance, and that we're actually talking about a 6-foot setback is required. And what they're now wanting is a 2-foot setback. Staff rarely supports less than 3 feet on setbacks. And with this being new construction, staff believes that there can be modifications in order to meet that 3-foot setback to the side. I know we're only talking about 12 inches, but it can make a difference when you're maintaining that property. The other, and emergency access, and the other comment staff would make is when the drainage is going to come over and go into the neighbor, yes, they're going to put gutters on there, but it's been my experience, those gutters sometimes get full and they overflow. So that drainage is going to occur and come over those gutters and could possibly go into the neighbors. So that's, and when you're only talking about 2 feet, staff believes that that's just really not an appropriate space. There needs to be at least 3, a minimum of 3. But again, with this being new construction, staff believes those adjustments can be made, and we'll be glad to answer any questions that you might have.
Kathleen, you, correct me if I'm wrong, but you stated that normally it's no less than 6 feet, correct?
That's what the ordinance requires, is 6 feet. And we have, staff will frequently support a 3-foot setback, but in this case, we're even going less than that.
Right. And 15 total,
Yes.
right.
Would you be more agreeable if we went to 2'6"? versus 3? To squeeze it in a little bit, just to offer a little bit more drainage space and,
You know, that obviously is up to you,
yeah,
but, yeah, we like to see
3
the,
foot is kind
Yeah.
of your
kind
bottom.
of, our boundary
Okay.
on that. I know some of the older lots in Indianapolis, and as you know, sometimes those gutters are about this far, they're even touching. But those, staff will support those setbacks because those buildings are actually existing buildings. Whereas this is something, this is new construction. Yes, they're going to be remodeling the house and adding on to that. But again, staff would like to see the minimum of 3 feet from that setback, from the property line.
So a fence doesn't really apply to the setback rule because it's right on the property line and it's
That's
not the
right.
structure on the property.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay.
And does it apply, I mean, does it make a difference if it's a carport as opposed to the actual residence itself?
It would be the same thing.
Okay,
Yeah,
because it's all one structure?
because it's a structure, yes.
Any other questions for Kathleen?
I'm content.
Content?
Okay.
Anything else? No. Thanks, Kathleen. You have 5-minute rebuttal if there's anything you'd like to add or change.
I just want to briefly touch on the topic of drainage because it was brought up, and a couple points. One is from the 2-foot point that I have now, I have a sidewalk, so I've got 2 feet from the sidewalk to the fence, 2 feet 6 inches actually. That would be unchanged. That's all been recently turned, and I've started planting hostas in there, so that's got a good ability to handle drainage. On the other side of the fence, that's total concrete, and it's concrete from the house out to the fence. So it seems to me, you know, I'm just kind of sitting here thinking, hey, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. I'm wanting to not have 100% of the drainage, but in any event, it is what it is, and then I'm wanting to maximize my side development, but the landscaping to keep the foliage in there is important. The other thing is, we're going to have gutters all the way around this, and I'm not sure of Catherine's situation, but if you look at houses that are 10, 15, this house is over 50 years old, the gutters are smaller than what they build today. And I'll be having the larger gutters installed. So I don't think there's any chance that we're going to have any drainage problem. And I just wanted to share that with you because I've experienced the gutter problem and know the benefit of having the right kind of gutter. So we're going to be developing it correctly. And thanks.
John, I had one question for you. Maybe I saw it on another drawing, but are you just building a porch and a carport, or are you doing a whole remodel?
A whole remodel, sir. We're taking a 2-bedroom house and turning it into a 1-bedroom house, which is going to allow us to put a master bathroom in and sufficient closet space. That's not something that you would find an investor doing who wanted to flip a house or someone who wanted to create a rental. What we're doing is creating a house that's going to be ours because we want to live in this community. I've already had a garage built. The garage is 2-car with a solid wall down the middle. I'm a woodworker, and that allows me to have my woodworking shop on the side. And then inside the house, we're going to extend the back out almost 20 feet, and that will be a family room, which will enable us to reconfigure the kitchen and make it a little bit more accommodating. It'll all be one floor. The only roof line differences is we're wanting to bring that bungalow craftsman low angled roof that has a little longer eave line that sticks out, and that'll be distinctive in the front porch.
On the picture of the new garage, it doesn't show any gutters. Were that
That was
It's
before
taken
they were
prior to they were
installed.
installed.
They're on there
Okay.
now.
perfect?
So your existing garage, which you've since torn down, then you had a sidewalk on the side of that also, correct?
That's correct. And we're gonna come back, we're gonna rip everything out, the
Right.
driveway and new concrete throughout.
So that, the sidewalk that extended beyond your existing driveway that you referenced was pretty close to the property line anyway, that will all come out?
That'll come back out, and our hope is that we'll have the concrete, we'll have the columns sitting on a concrete foundation, and that'll be the edge of the carport, and from that point to the west will be dirt, garden.
Big garden? Okay.
So actually, we're going to expand the permeable area a little bit.
You say your neighbor has a sidewalk down the east side of his house, between
Yeah,
the
and if
fence
you-
and the house?
And if you look at the aerial in the packet that was put together, you can see that their roof line is hanging over. I didn't measure, but my guess is that that has a variance due to a pre-existing condition. That's the house that burnt down a few years ago on New Year's Eve and was rebuilt, and it's amazing. I didn't realize it, but looking at old Google ground photos, it is so close to being identical that I argued with the guy who sold me the house when he explained to me that that house totally burnt down and was rebuilt.
Oh, yeah.
Any other questions? So we're going to vote on each aspect of the request independently. So we'll vote on the coverage component first, and then we'll have a vote on the setback.
As Catherine pointed out, and I want to make sure that it looked like Steve had kind of keyed on this at one point, the total side yard needs to be 16 feet, and we're not going to be complying with that. So there's reason, and I'm not sure if I should be bringing this up, that there's actually 3 different subjects. In her write-up, she noted, and let me read it. The staff would note that the ordinance requires a combined, this is the first, well, it's in the staff comments, combined 16-foot setback. Site plan indicates a 7-foot combination setback and a 10-foot separation between structures, but the request did not. So that's, I don't want to be disqualified because of a technicality. I think from a technical standpoint, that's a separate subject from the total development side of the 35 and 30% and the 2-foot side yard on the west side of the property. Could be argued it's one and the same, but she pointed it out as being separate, so I didn't want to.
Sure. Do you have any comment on that, Kathleen, with regard to the total setback now being,
Well, basically, it already exists. In other words, that there's that 7,
what does
the reduced setbacks are already in place, and so it's basically what we would call a legal nonconforming use.
okay. So the carport factor doesn't restrict that further? Okay,
No.
all right.
So we are voting on.
We're voting on the
Space requests.
open space request.
You want me to read these together? You want me to read this one, then we'll vote?
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Okay. Variance, our petition 2018 DBS 005, open space request is approved, 5-0.
On the setback, are we voting on a 2-foot setback?
The newly proposed, the vote will be for the updated drawings with the newly proposed 2-foot setback with the decorative columns.
Waiting for somebody to say, yeah.
And petition 2018 DVS 005, side yard setback is approved, 5-0.
Thank you.
You're welcome, thank you.
Yep.
John, I was waiting for you to say yes. That's what I meant, wanted.
Good, nice
That's
presentation.
Yeah,
correct,
very
right?
well done.
2
That's
foot.
correct.
All right.
Thank you.
Next up, we have 2018 DBS 006, 5360 Carlton Way, Tony and Pamela Brozan. The petitioner, their representative, step to the podium, state your name and address for the record.
My name is Pamela Brozan. I currently live at 1707 Christopher Lane, Speedway, Indiana. So we are asking for a just side yard offset of 7.5 feet on both sides of the house. The requirement is 8 feet, so I'm asking for 6 inches on either side or 1 foot total side yard. We are also building our forever home. We have 2 young kids that my husband has taken out because they're too much candy from Halloween. So we are planning to tear down the house that's there and completely build a brand new house, brand new basement. Spend a lot of money to build our forever home here in Speedway. My husband's lived here since 2001. I lived here since 2011 when we got married. And you know, we sat down and we made a decision, a conscious decision, that we wanted to stay in Speedway because we could go and spend less money and live in Brownsburg next to my sister. I could move to Carmel. I could move to Evil Creek, but we want to be here in Speedway because we just like Speedway that much. And we're also building a handicapped accessible home because hopefully in the not too near future, we anticipate one of our parents or 2 parents coming potentially to live with, and we want to be there for our parents to be able to take care of them. So there's a full bath on the first floor, and there's a circle on it. That's so that wheelchair can get around. And then we don't want to have any ramps. We're going to have even access in, so you can come up the sidewalk and go right up on the front porch if you were on a wheelchair, which is why we kind of need an attached garage, 2-car garage, because if somebody is handicapped, they need to be able to get in and out without having to move another car potentially.
So it's not a step up into the house, it's just a flat
Right.
roll-in?
It's
So
just
the
a flat
plans that
rolling,
you've
yeah.
submitted are not the same as what you're planning to build?
You can't tell from, because,
Right.
so you'll roll
That's
in
all.
on the front,
Yeah.
the sidewalk to the front porch. When you go into the garage, it shows a step there.
It does.
Yeah, there's steps up and down.
So, I mean, but there's at least one way into the house that's a flat roll-in?
Yeah.
Okay.
And you'll notice, I don't know, you can't, there's a spot that's storage on the 3 different levels. It's in the same spot, all 3 levels. That is in case we ever need an elevator.
Okay.
So I noticed that not all the doorways are 36 inches on the interior either, which would be a minimum required for full handicap accessibility.
Yeah, that's true. We don't really anticipate the handicapped person going on the 2nd floor.
Okay.
It's really designed for the 1st floor for the parent. The office would be a would be their bedroom, and then
Okay.
they would have access to the garage, the front yard, the backyard.
And you're planning on keeping the detached 2-car garage in back?
Yeah, we were, because it's cheaper to keep it.
So the garage would be a drive-through on the
Yes,
house?
the garage would be a drive-through.
Okay. Any other questions for the petitioner?
No, not currently.
Steve, you have any other questions?
No, I don't. I think
you.
she's answered them.
My builder's here too, if you want to.
Certainly.
Sure. Is there anyone who wishes to speak for or against this petition? Please step to the podium and state your name and address for the record, please.
I'm Alfred Zetzel. I live at 5330 Carlton Way, to the property just east of the proposed house. I provided this to your secretary earlier on, so you should have copies if she made them for you. If not, I'll read it for you anyway. The proposed new house with attached garage will obstruct the ability of the power company to access the lines and poles in the utility easement. On that, the plans for the proposed house have a glaring omission, namely the identification of the utility easement. The architect or developer says he intends to bury the utility, but firstly, that's not in writing, and secondly, buried or not, the utility easement still stands. Large trucks or other equipment necessary to maintain the utilities will not be able to approach the easement. Now, since this is the end of the wiring for the whole 5300 block of Carlton Way, the north side anyway, and since this property is already encroaching considerably into the easement by another building on the property, it's likely that the utility will find it very difficult to use their easement with the present driveway of the property obstructed by the attached garage proposed.
So,
Verbally, Mr. Robert Campbell told me he considers the approach to the easement will come from Lyndhurst down the whole 5300 block to the house in question. That's a rather extreme approach to the utility easement and for anything of the utilities. Those utilities are power wires, they're the cable wires and whatever is all on those poles. So it's not just a single utility that we're talking about. It's the whole-
approximately where on the property do those
it's
power lines, power poles run? Are they towards the back by the trail?
No, it's not. The plans do show a utility easement at the back on the north end of the property. That's not the utility easement I'm talking about. The one I'm talking about is about maybe 50 feet behind the existing house or so. And there's a line of telephone poles going all the way from Lyndhurst all the way down the block to the last two poles, which service the last two houses then. The one that we're talking about will be the second last house on that string, and then there's one more house beyond that.
And
right now they're served by overhead wires that are put in there.
And about how close to the poles will this new structure be?
Well, I doubt that the construction will interfere with that. The one thing that I did mention, the existing detached garage is already in the easement area by about 4 feet or something like that. And so it's already not right. Secondarily, the new house will probably not be any worse than what's already there as far as that's concerned. But the objection then is that how do the utility people come to serve the poles and wires for the whole block from that end?
They have
If
equipment
they
that's.
can't go through the property, they're building from side to side on the property.
They have equipment that's designed, it's track-mounted, smaller equipment to navigate through
Well,
smaller side yards. A utility truck couldn't get to my backyard
it could not, but the
with
way
the
they're.
way my driveway is and the
See,
house and.
Okay, they have an open driveway now. If they put an attached garage on there, even with the two car doors that they propose to put in there, I don't think that you're going to have a utility truck drive through their garage to service the pole in the
Well,
back.
I'm saying, but-
It's just not practical.
A utility truck could not get to my backyard right now either,
Well,
just by
admittedly,
all
okay.
the structures being in compliance. The utility easement is not in place to make sure the trucks can get from the street back to their poles. The utility easement runs along the line of the utility to either side to maintain them space under their utility or around that utility to work. It's
Well-
not a defined pathway from
Okay,
the thoroughfare to the,
Fair enough, I mean, but I'm just pointing it out that this is what, the only objection I have.
Okay.
The 6 inches they're asking for is a pittance compared to the other problem that's not even addressed. I mean,
Well,
the utility easement.
if they had an 8-foot side yard setback,
Yeah.
that would be,
Yeah, well, that's, okay, yeah.
would that be
Well,
any better than
you know,
7.5 feet?
well, 7.5 or 8 feet, I don't know if they intend to drive a utility truck into 7 feet to go back to their pole.
If they were at 8 feet, they would be compliant, and there would be
Well,
no issue.
That's true, but now they have an open driveway, so a truck can easily get back
But
there.
it's, the open
which if
driveway is
they
not a
put-
requirement. They could build to within
Well,
8 feet of the property line
admittedly
and not have
so,
any issues, is
but
what I'm
they're-
saying.
Well, you understand what they're doing is taking away an ability that's now there, and
But
it won't
the
be
utility
there.
does not use a person's driveway necessarily
Well-
to access the easement. The idea of the easement is to give them a path through the backside of the properties to access the utility. Their lines or poles or whatever, they don't go through a person's front yard. So if somebody puts a fence across their easement, they have the right to tear down that
Right,
fence.
right, yeah.
Correct.
Uh-huh.
But that's only along that line that goes through the back of the yard, not from the street to the easement. The utility does not have the authority necessarily
Well,
to access that way.
this is why when I objected to
Right.
Mr. Campbell there, and he put the suggestion out that the easement extends all the way to Lyndhurst.
That's
And I
correct.
said, do you, in your
That's how
right
they
mind,
access it.
consider that a utility truck would start from Lyndhurst and
That's
go all the
exactly
way
where
down
they-
the block?
If
That's
that was
exactly
their
where
only
they would
way,
start at.
if that was their only,
Well, yeah.
but if it helps ease your concerns at all, if you turn onto Norfolk Circle and go about 2 houses north, there is a utility easement access from the street all the way over to the 5364 backyard
Okay, well.
that,
I
that
didn't
provides
know
them
that.
some
Yeah, I
means
didn't
of
know this.
ingress, egress as well
Okay.
for equipment that
Yeah.
the neighborhood can't build on and cannot obstruct. So there is some
Well,
other avenues for them to get to those poles other than going through your front yards.
Okay, whatever. I mean, well, that and will they didn't ask for, and didn't state so, except verbally, that they would bury the utility lines instead of having them overhead the way they are.
That's not a requirement, that's a
And,
personal choice from their building standpoint. We don't have any governance over
I didn't know if
that.
there was a covenant on that or not, whatever.
We have no governance over that.
Okay, whatever.
Thank you. Anybody else who wishes to speak for or against the petition? Seeing none, we'll hear from Ms. Blackham.
Kathleen Blackham again, representing the Department of Metropolitan Development. Staff, as you can see from the staff report, we're recommending approval. Again, we're talking about 6 inches on either side. And the staff feels like that's not going to impact either a budding property owner. In terms of, I don't know if you have a color copy of the map that it's on 16, and if you do, the pink lines are the easements. And you can see, and you, Chairman Simonson, you talked about that, the one the pink line that's to the west, that's between 1283 and 1305, that goes. But then those are the pink lines. There's also utility easement running north and south along that entire parcel of 5364. You see that going north and south?
Yep.
And then, of course, you've got that easement in the rear. So, again, staff would be glad to answer any questions, but staff didn't believe the 6 inches was a major issue in this case.
So there is no easement on that service line that runs down behind all the houses?
I didn't see that.
Okay. Because it's just a feeder line for those
It must be.
particular residences. It's not
Yeah,
the main power source for the region.
right.
Okay.
Because that's, when I bring the layer up on the GIS, which is where this is from, that's the layer that shows the easements, the pink, and so there, and maybe it's a private easement, I don't know what that is, but it did not appear on the GIS. But those, again, those are pink, those lines that are pink identify the easements. You can also see if you go further north on Norfolk Circle that there's another easement that cuts into the,
Goes back to the old railroad
yes.
area. Yep. Okay.
But again, they're utility easements, sewer, electrical, optical lines go through there.
Any other questions for Kathleen? You have anything else to add to your petition?
No, Mr. Chairman.
We will vote on the petition.
Petition 2018 DVS 006 is approved, 5-0.
Congratulations.
Good luck.
So, before we close our meeting, I'd like to take a minute to thank Michelle Leidy, our former recording secretary, who I found out at the end of last week is no longer with the town. She was a tremendous asset to our board. Her ability to patiently and carefully work with each petitioner as they navigated the process to get all the paperwork filed was beyond compare, and she will be greatly missed as an asset to this board, and I wish her well in whatever her future endeavors are, and thank her very much for all her time that she spent with our board. So, anybody else have anything they'd like to say to Michelle?
No, yeah, thanks for her time. Yeah, she'll be missed, that's for sure.
Yeah, thanks, Michelle, for the communications.
So, is there any other business to come before our board? Seeing none, we are adjourned at 7:50.